All right, we're live on StreamYard, and we're live on the radio in 5, 4, 3.
And we are back, folks, here on the Michigan Insider Sports Talk 1050 WTKA online at WTK.com. Sam Webb, Matt the Miz Mizler on the other side, and joining us as they do every single week for the MGoBlog Roundtable is the MGoBlog crew, minus Craig Ross, who is feeling under the weather. Feel better, Craig, but I'm sure the fellas will hold it down in your place. Starting off first, the man that started it all over at MGoBlog, Brian Cook. Brian, good morning. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Doing great, my friend. And Seth Fisher, how are you this morning?
I'm all right. I'm glad that the sickness that's knocked out Brian so far and a couple other staff members and Craig Ross now is staying the hell away from us. Just keep that in Ann Arbor. I don't want that here in Detroit.
I hear that, man. Before we kind of move on and get into some basketball and hockey, just want to get your reaction to the news that we knew was coming, and that is the CP, Chris Partridge, is back on the scene for the University of Michigan. The significance of that to you, Brian, is?
Well, I mean, he was an excellent recruiter when he's here. He knows Harbaugh. He knows all about Harbaugh's little quirks. So I assume that it'll be a good fit. And Michigan does need a little recruiting help after the last cycle.
No doubt, no doubt. And Seth, we've talked, we've beaten the NIL subject to death. Here you have a guy who's going to come in with some pretty good NIL intel. I mean, we all suspect how it really goes down, right? But like he really knows how the hot dog is made, right? And then
I think that the guy is on the. I'm sure that they know already, right? So I don't know that that no one's sitting around in the Michigan program being like, "Oh no, how do you do this?" Right? It's more of a how do they get away with it? We don't kind of thing. Um, but I mean, Partridge is not just a guy who knows how recruiting works. He's a good coach, and like he did a great job at Paramus. He did a great job here at Michigan. Like you look at the things that he coached here, special teams were great under Baxter. They were great under Partridge, and they remained great under Jay Harbaugh. But he had a big imprint on how that went down, and Michigan's historically done awesome with when they get high school coaches. I know they made a rule just because of Chris Partridge, and 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 they because they're like, oh, that's not fair. They can get this guy, but like high school coaches, especially at the big programs, do tend to be really good coaches. It just turns, I guess, the ability to coach translates when you move up, and he's kind of the next one. So I'm glad we really got him back, and I also like that Michigan's coaching staff is doing what they do with the players, which is oversigned by a little bit, expecting attrition.
oh yeah, no doubt. That's a great way to put it. I hadn't heard that analogy, but that's exactly what's going on. Like you know that there's some move will be made. Maybe it's a soft landing that you're kind of forecasting or allowing for, and then he'll slide into form. But to your point, yeah, maybe they know how it's done, but it's good to know what offers are real out there, right? It's a whole lot of I keep using, hey, we'll give you a McDonald's franchise because I've actually heard that one. You got a guy who's coming. He knows exactly what some of these programs like specifically what they're getting on what they're really giving guys and can bring that expertise to the fold and to the extent that it helps Michigan strategically with their projections for things. You hope it helps there, but I think maybe even bigger, at least as far as impact is concerned, Brian, is he can bring some of the strategy to the fold. He actually hired Albert when he was here, so you're talking about a guy that, from an operational standpoint, I think can really help tweak Michigan's recruiting approach in ways that it needs to be tweaked.
Yeah, and he was also a pretty good linebackers coach when he was here too. So if that's what he ends up coaching here, I think that's another asset to the move.
Yeah, man, I definitely think coming out of that championship or the playoff game, I felt like if he were going to make a move, looking at that game, I felt like that would be the move that he was going to make. Talking about
Mhm.
Jim. That's how it felt to me looking at that. I don't know what you guys thought. We talked about it a little bit, but I think we focused mostly on the offense and not as much on the defense.
Yeah, I've had some rough grades for the linebackers. Now, I've been saying since they went Ravens that system is very hard on linebackers. And when you look at what they did at the Ravens, they went cheap on the linebackers. Like where they put their money was the secondary, and then they found guys who could run the system. They wanted long guys, athletes who could kind of run, who could pass up. Sorry, defend the pass really well. And Junior Colson seems like the perfect guy. And also, they want you to be able to blitz off the edge and do a lot of different things. And Colson looks like the perfect guy, but his grades have been like, his freshman year, he was just running the wrong direction. And then sophomore year, it was like 50-50 on high volume. So if you could turn that guy into a real player, right? Into somebody who's consistently grading out positively. That is a spot. That's the way to turn this defense into an elite defense and get a second cornerback. But like everything else was actually performing better than people realized.
Yeah, and then Brian, it's coming a year. I mean, that was George Hilo is Mike McDonald's guy. That was one of his guys, one of his boys that he brought in with McDonald leaving. It just it always, when you see the guy who hires you kind of move on, you kind of look at where likely attrition might be. I kind of look at that. If who brought you in kind of goes, you're maybe more prone to be one of the next ones to kind of look to leave, sort of deal. And that's kind of
Yeah.
how I see this one. And hopefully, as it all works out, everyone winds up better off for it, because Michigan has some talented linebacker. We know Junior Colson, who we gotta point out, he was banged up in that game, just like Will Johnson went banged up with a foot. You had Junior Colson banged up in that game in much the same way. But you got Junior. They say Nakai is looking to come back. You added the Houseman kid. I mean, you got to be feeling pretty good about the talent level at the linebacker position heading into next year, right?
And Rolder too.
And Jimmy Rolder, right?
Yeah, Rolder actually looked pretty good at the end of last year. So, I mean, last year they had no depth, right? And now like they've got depth, so they could roll 4 deep, 5 deep at that position. Where last year, an injury to linebacker was going to be, oh no, true freshmen on the field.
Yeah. So we shall see, fellas. As let's get over into basketball, because we haven't talked it a lot lately. It has been hard to talk for much of the season, as they have been a massive work in progress on defense. Really struggled on that end of the floor. They've actually shown some competency of late, Brian. Which, look, I'm not gonna make it into this huge deal. They aren't stalwarts or anything, but they at least have started to show a pulse on that end of the floor, especially against Northwestern and who was the game after Northwestern? Ohio State. And so, I'm hoping that that's something that they can continue to build on as they face a very, very game Indiana squad this weekend.
Yeah, and I mean there were a lot of breakdowns against Nebraska,
hmm
but man, Casey Tominaga, that's a fun player.
He was
got some
frustrating.
Spike Albrecht vibes off of him, but he was back cutting and he was driving against people and throwing stuff up and it was going down. I was like, man, that kid can play. But yeah, they've done some stuff here of late that makes me think that they're coming close to turning the corner. And you're seeing, I think Kobe Buffkin in particular, step up on a consistent basis in a way that he was doing every once in a while before, but now it kind of feels like, okay, he's maybe rounding into a guy who you can really rely on game in, game out as that third scorer that you need. And that's, I think, huge for Michigan.
Yeah, Tominaga was a frustrating. I wondered. I mean, were they underestimating the dude? He was just getting to the basket too easily, and then I remember, well, that has been a theme against Michigan this year. What I liked about Northwestern and what I liked about the Ohio State effort, Seth, was you had a team that was more connected defense. They talked a lot more. You could really see them kind of, correcting each other on the fly, kind of calling out switches and calling out screens. Those things were happening in those games. So I'm hoping that what we see against Indiana is more like that than the lapses we saw at times last night.
Yeah, and the lapses are still freshman lapses. So I mean, Casey kind of got dug on his heels a few times, and sometimes they actually Nebraska came out with 2 sets which were brilliant. They got him a couple dunks, and that was taking advantage of Michigan not being able to run the thing they do at a very high level. Now they tried a zone, a few games back, and the problem with their zone is they wouldn't get over and cover the corners, right? Like Jet would be like missing the spot. So I like they have this kind of zone that turns into man defense the second somebody goes in the corner or someone tries to attack. As soon as anyone does anything, it turns into man. And they run that fairly well, but it's a complicated system and sometimes they just mess it up. And I thought that Nebraska had a plan for exactly that. And as soon as they kind of fixed that up a little bit, that was when Nebraska went on their slow run. And after that, I don't know. I think it takes a lot of energy to play defense, and when you're up, what was it, 45-17 or something? Like it was a Michigan Ohio State score plus 10 or something. So it was it was such a blowout. I think that they lost a little bit of energy, and Juwan thought it too because he put his energy guys out there. All of a sudden, he's like, now entering the court, Will Cheddar. That's when Michigan needs energy, right?
Yeah, that's why I'm playing that guy every game. He gives you that boost off the bench. And you know what? I mean, quietly kinda. Does it feel like to you guys Joey Baker is kind of finding his stroke a little bit? I don't know if he was struggling with confidence a little bit in there a few weeks ago, but lately he seems to be a little more dialed in from distance.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the case. Like he's shooting 44% on the year, so it's not like he was ever like doing badly, but I do think that he's gotten to a spot where you just expect him to knock stuff down when he gets the open shots. So I mean that's a huge difference for Michigan, right? Like they are in the spot where they are actually getting those kickouts from Hunter Dickinson doubles. He was much better against Nebraska. And the quality of looks they had against that team, I think, was on a totally different level than it had been for much of the year. And part of that's Nebraska. But Nebraska is a top 50 defense, so they're not terrible. They're not Iowa. So being able to get that number of open shots against a team that has been fairly decent defensively, I think is encouraging.
Yeah, there was the one that he shot in the corner where he shoots it and he starts running down the floor before the ball even gets to the rim. It's like, yeah, that dude's feeling it. And
Yeah.
he's in the zone, and hopefully he keeps it up because I think Hunter, one of the big adjustments for him, I got to give Tim McCormick some credit for calling this out a month ago. He said, man, Hunter is moving. He's making decisions too slow. Like he needs to move quicker, whether it's making a move or passing the basketball. He has got to be quicker, anticipating the double team. And we've started to see more of that, whether it's definitely getting into his move quicker, but finding guys. And they haven't always made the open shots, but it feels like they're doing that a little more here of late, which is crucial as they face one of the hottest teams in the Big Ten. We were talking off air about it. Indiana, they had a 3-game losing streak early in the season. They got blown out by Penn State. And after that game, Trace Jackson Davis goes, and I can't remember if it was in the post-game press conference or if it was like during the week, but he calls out the team. And it's like, we just went out there and we didn't do anything the Coach Woodson told us to do. Kind of calling everyone out. And since then, Seth, they've been one of the best teams, one of the hottest teams in the conference, one of the hottest teams in the country. They went from off the radar to now what are they lately? I think they're number 18 or something like that.
Yeah,
They're
the only loss
they're
they've
really
had
going
lately
well.
is Yeah, they went to Maryland and lost, and other than that, I think they've been on a tear since that 3-game losing streak. And Trace Jackson Davis, he's now number 2 on KenPom, and that is a big turnaround for that guy who was, a little bit of a laugh every time we bring him up in past years. Like
Mhm.
he was, I think he's one of those guys who, thought he was going to the lottery when he got here and played like it, right? Like, hey, I'm just cooling my heels in Indiana for a year, and then the NBA is going to want me. And then the NBA didn't want him, and I think that he's kind of come around to who he is. And who he is still an incredible athlete. He's not that big, right? And he's not an outside shooter, but he's a really good defender. He's really tough to handle down low. Michigan's historically done pretty well against him, but he's just turned the game to another level. So, I mean, Hunter's gonna. I I like this kind of matchup. I like when Hunter has a center that he can sink his teeth into instead of all these moops that they play against. So we'll see how he does. But I think Michigan can win this one. I think that Indiana is just they're not looking forward to Michigan. We're a little bit of a worse matchup for them than some of the teams they played.
Yeah, you brought up Seth, the Big Ten tournament, though. I mean, Michigan had gone down to Bloomington. I want to say down to Bloomington, they had handled them. I want to say it was Caleb Houston that had like his only good road game of the year or something like that against them. And you're expecting, or I was expecting, for them to go and handle Indiana in much the same way in the tournament, and it didn't work out that way. Brian, as Michigan squandered. Remember, they had like a big halftime lead, and Indiana just came roaring back in the second half, and it was really Trace Jackson Davis that turned the tide for him.
Yeah, and I mean, he's been one of those guys who you've always kind of been waiting for, like, okay, where are we going to see it from him? And okay, now we're seeing it. Like, he's been excellent all year, and he's a major reason that they've gotten to where they've gotten to. Now they're not, a super elite team. They're in the 20s in KenPom. Definitely a very like manageable game for Michigan, but it is going to have to be a game where Hunter wins his matchup.
Yes, 100%, 100%. That was the tale of the two games. Was Hunter outplayed? I really outplayed Trace Jackson Davis in Bloomington, and in the Big Ten tournament, TJD he was head and shoulders. He won that matchup, and it wasn't close. So I like the matchup from the standpoint of I think that historically, these two, I think Hunter's length kind of bothers him. We've seen that before. You just got to hope that what we saw him do, whether it was, getting second chance opportunities, the quickness factor that he used to his advantage in that game, you got to hope that that was an anomaly, because Hunter in the Big Ten tournament, I think he got outscored by 9 or 10 points in that game. I was looking at it last night, so he
Yeah,
needs to be big. What about the matchup between Kobe Buffkin and Jalen Hood-Schifino?
well, I mean, Hood Schifino is a guy who has a ton of size, a big recruit, hasn't really put it together inside the line yet. So his turnover rate's over 20. He's shooting 42% from 2, but he's a 40% three-point shooter. Pretty much everybody Indiana has, except for Jackson Davis, who's in their starting lineup, is shooting 40% from 3. So in terms of defense, you just got to stay in front of people, and you can't come off anyone, because you just got to D up one-on-one. And that's something that, Buffkin has been working on. I don't know exactly. I don't know if we've seen him tested like he's going to be tested, but I mean, Hood Schifino is a guy who has the ball a lot, but kind of has that Doug McDaniel freshman vibe sometimes, where his actions with the ball aren't always totally purposeful. He makes some bad decisions because he's a freshman, and Buffkin is going to have an opportunity. I don't know that he's going to get Hood Schifino on defense, because they like putting Trey Galloway on guys, and he seems like the best size matchup. And then Hood Schifino's
And
a
where are
little
you
bit
going to
bigger.
put Doug then? Because Galloway's
I-
the shortest guy out there.
Well, no. So I mean, Doug can check anybody who's not Hood Schifino or Jackson Davis because they're all just a shooter guys who stand in the corner. But I'm talking about who Buffkin's going to go up against when Michigan has the ball. I don't think it'll be Hood Schifino because, like, in terms of size, he's a better match for Jet Howard. So it'll be interesting. I think there's going to be some cross matching going on and switches, and it'll be confusing for both teams. But really, it just comes down to, like, does Indiana have to double on Hunter Dickinson? And since Michigan refuses to double, does that let Jackson Davis kind of continue his senior surge here? And I mean, it's a pretty simple game right now.
Well, Michigan showing up on some in some bubble mention. I ignore all that. They're on the bubble if they win this one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
win this
I don't know how
game,
you guys
and
feel about it.
you can start, like, maybe thinking about it, but you got to win this game before you even start.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the one thing that I like is the Doug matchup is going to be terrible. Like it's everyone's got length, so he's not going to be able to get his shot up. And there's like you say you can hide him on anybody, but Miller Kopp can shoot over anybody, right? That's what he is. He's a guy in the corner, but he also gets his shot up. So, like, he's Joey Baker, right? Would you want Joey?
They're going to get their shots
Baker
up. Like,
yeah.
Hey,
So-
look, they got beat up pretty bad at that spot against Ohio State, and they were able to weather it. They did a good job on everyone else. That's just it's gonna be tough to hide them in certain games. And it it's just is what it is. What speaking of which, but what do you think of his progress so far? Because yeah, he's had some herky-jerky moments. He looks like a freshman out there. One thing I can say about him, though, he has been a better shooter than I expected him to be. I don't have his numbers in front of me, but I don't feel like, oh no, every time he hoists one from three. I mean, he crosses over and pulls up from three last night. I was like, man, okay, Dougie, it's better than I thought it was going to be.
yeah, I think that's accurate. He's a guy who is able to pull up, and it's not always a disaster. I feel like, he's got to get better at getting shots inside the line, because pretty much everything he's taking inside the line is like a runner. Like, none of it is something that projects to be sustainable, efficient offense. But yeah, from the outside, yeah, we're in business.
Yeah, I
he's
mean,
like
I think he has to
50%
get
on
proficient.
breakaways.
He has to get proficient at a runner, though. I mean,
Yeah,
he's
he has
got
to get proficient at a runner, but also you got to be able to make that part of your game, but not your whole game. So he's never going to be big, but we saw Xavier Simpson be able to get to the basket and get up layups, and that part of his game has not really come through yet.
Yeah, I just don't know what one of the things that helped X become obviously we know he had to figure out something in the mid range. For him, it was the hook. I mean, Dougie's got to figure out something in between.
Yeah.
And so, but for now, look, man, I'm taking better than I expected, and I'm not, the other guys really have to continue to raise their level of performance, and hopefully they can get it done against Indiana this weekend. Huge game for Michigan. I want to segue into some hockey. So what we're going to do in order to help that segue is we're going to get to a break. We'll come back on the other side and get to the question. With the way that this team is playing, there's a lot of buzz that, hey, man, just take the interim tag off. Brandon Naurato is showing that he's ready to be the guy. I want you guys' take on that. And one of the things, I really want some insight and some intel on what the hockey people are saying. I know what the fans are saying. What are the hockey folks saying? The hockey writers, the coaches, the insiders. What are they saying about this? And Miz, that's a great toss to you because we have a little giveaway, right?
You're exactly right, Sam. I'm kind of glad you made that segue. Coming up Saturday, it is, as I mentioned, the second stop of 5 different stops for Michigan over the next few weeks as they are playing Duel in the D against Michigan State over at Little Caesars Arena. Puck drop at 8 o'clock against the number 15 ranked Spartans. Number 5 Michigan playing for the Iron D.
Nice.
Nice. Caller number 7 right now, 734-998-1050. We're going to hook you up with a pair of tickets to go see the Spartans lose, hopefully, to the Michigan Wolverines. Good luck.
Hey, man, with the way Michigan is playing, it's a pretty good bet, I think, to bet on the Blue. But we'll talk more about that on the other side here on the Michigan Insider on Sports Talk 1050 WTKA, The Ticket.
Clear on the radio.
Any one of you guys going down to the D?
No, I haven't gone in forever.
Yeah, man.
I might. I took my daughter last year and she loved it, so I've been wanting to get her to Yost. I haven't gotten her to Yost yet.
I love LCA. I just, it has
You
become
do?
very quickly. I do. It is one of my favorites. You don't like it?
Here's my problem. They make the seats down low way too expensive. So
Okay.
the good seats there, and then they have that like bar that everyone can go to who sits down there. So guess where everybody is? They're not sitting there. There's like this big empty bowl where like, your quote student section should be, right? And even in the game against Eastern, they did that. So like you had this rocking building, and like Michigan and Eastern are playing a great basketball game, even though Eastern turned out to be terrible. But it was a rocking environment, except that one area, which is like the golden area. It's they got to do something about that,
Yeah,
Like
I guess, you know what? I wasn't looking at it from that standpoint. I just the venue, the sight lines, the feel of the arena. I hated the Palace. I thought it was cavernous. I
Mhm.
thought when you sat high, you might as well have been, on Everest looking down at the game. This one, I think you feel you're literally on top of the action, but you don't feel like you're a mile away from it. I just like the vibe in the place. So
Yeah. Yeah,
I'm
and they got
just really,
Michigan night coming up, the Pistons too. So I'm looking forward to that as well. It's just I I went to a lot of Red Wings games at Joe, and I don't go to very many at the LCA because the Joe was a great venue.
so I
And
went to a Red Wings game versus the Maple Leafs last year, and
huh?
we were up like it's not suite level, but it's high. We were like literally right over the ice. It was the most amazing view of a hockey game I've ever seen. And so that's why I say there can't be a bad sight line in that
No,
build.
no, they designed it well. It's neither team's actually been that good since they've been there, and
True.
yeah, so they haven't gotten the vibe built up yet. But
I
yeah,
will say I've enjoyed the venue more than I've enjoyed the teams. That's for sure.
yeah,
That is for sure. So, but no, man,
yeah.
I want to get off into some hockey. So two things that I want to get into with you guys. Of course, the Narado question, because it seems like there's growing sentiment that he's the guy, but that's just what the message board buzz is, and what it sounds like fans are saying. Are you guys kind of getting that vibe in hockey circles that that's what people think is gonna happen?
Yeah, I'd say that's probably the end result here. Like, if he makes a tournament, he probably gets a job. And I think one of the daily writers has been running scenarios on pairwise, and it's pretty much impossible for him not to make the tournament at this point. So, at that point, yeah, you got to go with it.
Yeah, basically, Ohio State missed the tournament last year with an exact same scenario of Michigan losing out from here, and even that took a whole lot of bad luck. Like normally, the team, so like
Yeah.
Michigan would have to lose a lot of games, and they're probably not. I think that they're a better team than their record shows because like they had that series against Minnesota where everybody was sick, right? They lost guys to the juniors, so they had to play some series without Fantilli, and those are the games they lost this year. When they was it that Wisconsin game that's hanging around their neck? Like that was, part of the season. And then they played Minnesota pretty straight up in Minnesota. And that's maybe the best team in hockey. So like that's really where they are talent wise, and also young teams. Like we saw this a couple times already with Michigan. They're getting these guys who are draft picks, and then they get on the ice for the first time. Hockey is one of those sports you just get better at until you're, in your 30s. So they are trending way up. They're getting a lot better. I think the lines make a lot more sense now, and the hockey circles aren't really talking about Naruto because it just seems like obvious, right? They're like, well, he's there, he's winning. It's more kind of a when than an if. I don't know if they're saving it for a particular moment or what's going on, but I don't think that there's any question anymore. It's more just like when do they want to announce it? Maybe when they make the tournament, maybe like on a special occasion, maybe to get them hyped up so they don't lose that Notre Dame series at the end of the year like they always do.
Now, so from a recruiting standpoint, is Billy the ace recruiter? Like, who's the guy on staff?
I think it is Billy. I think Naruto does have a lot of juice, just being him. But yeah, it's supposed to be McCult, and I've heard that McCult probably might not be around.
That's
super
what I was
long
gonna
term.
ask. That's what I was gonna ask you.
Because it's hard when you get passed over like that, right?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask you, Brian. Very perceptive, my man.
Yeah.
So,
But
how do you replace that if he's bringing in all this talent?
On some level, Michigan recruits itself. Like there is, like someone, I don't remember who told me this, but they're like kids in Ontario. They either want there's two kinds of dreams that when you're a kid in Ontario. One is I want to play in the OHL, and one is I want to play for Michigan. So I think,
All right,
I
going
think
back
they'll
on
be
radio
okay.
here in a moment, gentlemen. Stand by.
Okay.
Back in 5, 4, 3.
And we are back, folks, here on the Michigan Insider Sports Talk 1050 WTKA online at WTKA.com. Sam Webb, Matt the Miz Mizler filling in for a vacationing Ira Weintraub. By the way, if you're down in Dallas, he's going to be speaking to the U of M club of Dallas. I want to say Saturday. Check it out. Check out the club schedule, club agenda for news and notes on that. But Ira will be there. Scott Bell said he's going to show up. So get on out and check that out. Before we get back to the roundtable, I want to let those of you who are in the market for a new car, know that our friends at Brighton Ford are ready for you to come on by and get on board. If you have a lease coming up in the next 6 months, now is the time to visit Brighton Ford. Get the options you want and contact them today at 1-800-NEW-FORD to take the hassle out of the entire buying process. You can do your entire deal online when you choose Calculate Digital Deal, either schedule delivery or choose 45 and drive. That's where they get you in and out of the dealership in under 45 minutes. Shop 1-800-NEW-FORD and get on board with Brighton Ford. So, fellas, are you officially on board with Brandon Naruto as the full-time, not the interim, remove the tag, coach of the University of Michigan hockey team, Brian Cook?
Yeah, I mean, team's playing well. They've been recruiting well. Their record is a little deceptive because they've played the hardest schedule in the country, and they've missed Fantilli. They had that series against Minnesota where they were missing half the team. They've had Truscott out the last couple of weeks. They missed Sam Miscavige for the Penn State series. Seamus Casey was out last weekend. They had the horrible situation with Steve Holtz. There's a good USCHO article on how that all went down. And it just, for them to come through all that and be precariously perched on the verge of a 1 seed and basically have to lose out to miss the tournament. And on top of that, you have more than one NHL guy talking about how Michigan systems are some of the best outside the NHL. So given all that, like, I kind of feel like the decision is made, because if you make the tournament, he's not getting fired. And at this point, they would literally have to lose out to miss the tournament. So for me, that's enough for me to say, all right, he's the guy long term.
Seth?
Yeah, somebody on our message board likened him to Ryan Day, which I know that Michigan fans don't love that comparison, but the the program under him is doing great. They're recruiting top notch. They're playing great, and he's got a lot of pro ability himself. Like he was an analyst for the Red Wings. He knows the systems they play. So it's not just that he doesn't just play something like the NHL. He can tell you how they do it in the NHL, how things are actually being done in the NHL since like 2018, because there's been a shift in how NHL teams operate, and he was part of that. And they're a lot better at using motion statistics and stuff like that. Things that I don't even know Michigan has, but they know how to. He knows how to tell guys what they're looking for in the NHL, and I think guys respond to that. And I think that is a thing that you can put at the core of your program if you want to play for the pros. If that's what your goal is, Michigan is the -- 1 destination, and they got that. They've got their location. The national development team is right here, and parents do move around Ann Arbor. You know, when their kids are in high school playing on those teams, so you have access to more access than anybody to those guys.
Well, those I mean, that's not. They moved it to Plymouth for one, and for two, usually by the time a guy gets on the U17 team, he's committed.
Right.
These days, not publicly, but I mean, the U17s are currently largely committed, and then August 1st, everybody else will announce their actual destination. So I don't necessarily think that that's a huge asset for Michigan. I mean, it probably helps in some recruitments, like an Andrew Kopp, who was a rare guy who was on the national team and didn't really have a whole lot of draft buzz and only got drafted the second time around. So, but they brought in a couple of guys who are definite 5-stars. They recruited one of the top guys on the U17 team, and they did all that with the fact that Narado is an interim coach. So if that's how they're doing now, they'll probably do even better once there's some long-term certainty in the program.
So we sort of talked about this in the break, Brian. I remember when obviously Michigan moved on from Mel. There was some thought that Billy McCullough would move up to that spot, to the interim spot. Brandon Narado obviously got it. Let's say that he's named the permanent coach. Do you think that the odds are good for retention for Billy? And if Billy were to leave, how big a loss would that be, especially to recruiting?
Well, I don't know. It's always hard when you're an assistant in a program and another assistant gets the job. Like that's just a situation in which you often see guys move on. But I know Billy loves Michigan, and I think he is an excellent recruiter. His connections all over the sport. He was running a BCHL team before he came over to Michigan. And if Michigan is so inclined, they can probably pay him better than anyone but an NHL team. So that's it for McCall. It's, does he want to go try to be an assistant on an NHL team with, eyes on bigger things down the road, or is he content to be Billy Powers? And some people are. And, if I was in his position, I'd be like, fine, let's win some national championships. But if he does decide that that's not, like, he wants something more, then you can't blame him for that. And I do think it would be a big blow to lose him. He is an excellent recruiter. He's a good coach. And I think when you saw the Mel Pearson report, you didn't see McCall implicated in any of that. And I think that says something too. Like, there's a situation where you're in a program that is not treating everybody particularly well, and you don't get caught up in that. So I think he's an asset to the program, and I would hate to lose him.
Yeah, man. You said something there in your response, Brian, that I think is kind of one of the differences that we've seen across the board for Michigan, say in the past 10, 12 years, is that you pay assistants at a level that they won't get poached for lateral positions.
Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
So maybe you just, especially you got to imagine you won't be paying Brandon Narado, not just, give, talk about somebody else's, bank account, but I don't think they would be paying him, what you might be paying a more proven coach. It would seem to me that even more of a reason to go pay Billy the kind of money that no other team can come and match for an assistant coach, Seth.
Yeah, you can pay him more than Northern Michigan's paying their head coach, right? But I think at this point I'd rather he'd go to the NHL than Wisconsin.
Mhm.
Well,
Is that-
I mean, I don't think he would get poached for anything other than a college head job or the
Mhm.
NHL. Like
Yeah.
the realistic suite of suitors in hockey outside the NHL that could get Billy McCult away from his alma mater for anything other than a head job, there's nobody. So, I think it's going to be, does he want to go to the league? And that's going to be it.
So go ahead, Seth.
No, I was just saying there's that I was speaking of head jobs, and I
Okay.
think the head job in Wisconsin's going to be open pretty soon.
Yeah, usually college hockey is so insular that those jobs usually stay within the family, which is
Mhm.
how Tony Granato got the job in the first place. I mean, he had a good resume. He's just not performing very well. But I mean, maybe another college team looks him up and thinks that it's a good idea. It probably would be.
Well, guys, one of the topics that we've talked about a lot with hockey of late, I mean, it's a huge basketball topic, guys, coming back. I mean, we've talked a lot about it with when it comes to Jet the past few weeks. Like, he's getting more and more lottery buzz, seeming less and less likely that he'll return. Not a definite that he won't, but less likely. But you look over at hockey, and, a couple years ago, you had basically the entire team come back. You just had Luke Hughes come back. So when you look at Adam Fantilli, what do you guys make of the prospects, Brian, of him coming back next year? I mean, am I wishing on a prayer? What do you think?
I mean, usually guys at that level do not come back. Like if you're a top 5 pick and you're slotted directly for the NHL, those guys are gone. There is sort of a CBA issue in the NHL where if you sign a guy at 18, his clock starts ticking on free agency, and you can delay that until 20. So if some NHL team drafts him and is wise enough to think, okay, I would rather have his 26 year than his 18 year, then you might see him come back. His brother's here too. That is something that probably factors into that decision. I would say it's unlikely. I mean, with everybody coming back a couple years ago, you had a COVID really played a major factor into that. They didn't get to play in the tournament that year. Yost was empty. I think a lot of those guys felt like the reason they came to Michigan, they didn't really get to actually have that experience. And so that was a major draw. We'll
Also,
see.
Owen Power in Buffalo. It was like Buffalo was just in this weird situation where they were trying to tank and they were picking up other people's contracts and they just happened to get a bunch of defensemen. So they were Owen Power could have helped them win games, and they didn't want that. They wanted to have they needed expensive guys so they could hit the cap minimum who could play terribly and get them better draft picks. So like that was a weird scenario that I would love that if it happens to Fantilli too, but I doubt it. I think that whoever drafts him wants to sell tickets. He's going to be, a big draw, especially after the year he's having, and that team is going to want him in the NHL right away.
So that being the case, look, it's season left, but you know how we are. We like to look to the future. I mean, what does the recruiting class look like, Brian?
Well, they had a bit of a lull, understandably, because of the Mel thing.
Mm-hmm.
So their incoming class is not great. They've got a couple of guys who should be drafted, but the incoming guys, most of the draft picks for Michigan are already on campus. So you're going to see a couple guys go in the first round in Fantilli, and then probably Gavin Brindley. And the guys are coming in next year. They have Nick Moldenhauer, who plays for Chicago of the USHL. He was a 3rd round pick, but his draft year, he had I think he got cut by a skate and he had some other illness, so he didn't really get to play. And this year in the USHL, he's playing like one of the best players in the league, so he'll be a big boost. Charlie Serrato is on the U18 team, but mostly these guys are going to be a bridge class. So they have a couple of big timers in 2024, a couple of big timers in 2025, and this will be the cost of the whole uncertainty around Mel. This class.
Keep in mind, we have not seen even every Frank Nazar is probably you can like mentally put him in next year's class because he hasn't played at all this year, right? Like that's and they're going to get back some of these guys. They've got COVID eligibility on a lot of these players too, so they actually can retain a pretty good team. I think next year is like they're in this cycle now because of the way they recruit, where they get this ridiculous class in, and then they kind of fumble it around a little bit because they're freshmen, got to figure out who these guys are, and they've got to figure out who they are. And then their sophomore years, the guys who come back, you're not going to get everybody, but if you get half of your draft picks back from your freshman class, those guys are sophomores. They really, that becomes your top two lines. That leads a championship caliber team, and then you kind of reset. So I think next year we're looking at that championship caliber team. Depending on who they get back, you never know who's going to be taken away by Michigan hockey summer. But there's a lot of talent that they have in this team that's so young that next year could be a really good season. And then what Brian's really talking about is the season. Hockey's weird. You have to look so far out in the future, right? You have to look at like the 15-year-olds who's interested in Michigan right now because that's when the classes come together.
Yeah, man. So look, you talk about the kind of interesting phase they will be in this offseason. I kind of look over at football and look at the quarterback situation like that, and I said, okay, well, hopefully they can go out and get a Sam Hartman. I know that NIL might play into that some, but hopefully they can do that. And then, the freshman quarterback that they bring in won't have to be a guy as a freshman. Is the portal a thing in hockey? I mean, does that help at all?
The portal is becoming more of a thing in hockey. So Western is pretty good this year, and they have a lot of guys who transferred. So that might be something Michigan looks to. It's going to depend on how many guys they get back and how many openings they have. So historically, Michigan has not been a heavy portal team because largely they're just trying to cram all the guys in their recruiting class onto campus. So they've taken a couple of guys here and there. And I'm sure if there's someone out there who fits a hole in the roster that's generated from an NHL departure, they'll seriously consider it. I just don't know if that is going to be a possibility.
Gotcha. Well, fellas, you got Super Bowl picks real quick? Philly versus Kansas City. Who do you got? Who you got?
I don't know.
It's weird. The NFC was like the battle of the good teams, and the AFC was the battle of the quarterbacks. So it's I pick good team over quarterback, Philadelphia.
You could pick Brandon Graham over Frank Clark and Mike Dana, and Chad Henne.
And Chad Henne, that's right. he got them there. He's not just holding a clipboard this year. Henne helped them make their way there. I said it's a quarterback league, right?
Yeah, you did. All right, Miz is giving me the wrap-up sign. Great job as always, fellas. Craig Ross, feel better, my friend. We hope to see you next week. To the rest of you, we'll see you tomorrow here on the Michigan Insider on Sports Talk 1050 WTK, The Ticket, the official voice of University of Michigan Sports, Ann Arbor, a Cumulus station.
All clear on the radio.